Hello, Blake Rudis here with F64 Academy, and today I'm going to show you one of the coolest magic tricks in Photoshop, and that is how you can apply a sky to an image that really needs one, like this one. So here's the first round. We went ahead and did this, and then we magically added another sky on top of that because I wasn't quite sure about this one and made this. Let's jump into Photoshop. I got a lot of cool stuff to show you. So what I'm going to do in this tutorial is show you how to replace the sky with blend if. Now blend if is really powerful. It's a really very powerful tool. If you've ever seen the video 5 ways blend if will blow your mind, one of the ones I did on YouTube, this is the 6th way that blend if will blow your mind because you can use it to replace the sky almost immediately. So here's a gorgeous shot. This is in Yosemite Valley. On the left-hand side, we've got El Cap here, and right here we got Half Dome and Sentinel Dome, and then here we got the Three Brothers, and we got Bridal Veil Falls, and then over here we got the Leaning Tower. All these things just right there in one beautiful shot overlooking these trees. So it's an iconic shot. But it's not so iconic on a Monday morning with no clouds and a pure white sky. I mean, I'm not even talking about any blue. This is just pure white nastiness. So what do? Well, this is where you can do a good sky drop in. So take a look at this photo and see that there's really no light coming in from any direction here. So we don't have any harsh light being cast anywhere. So we really don't have to worry about that too much. We can almost put any sky in here that we want, but we want to be careful about what kind of sky we put in here. So I've got a couple of skies here that we took while we were at Yosemite National Park, and these were from our deck off the condo. So I'm going to use this one here. If you don't have skies for your stock, that's fine. You can download these right here on YouTube. You can click this link and you can download these skies and use them in your own images. Or if you're on F64 Academy, just click the link above and that'll take you to the skies that you can grab. So let me go ahead and double click this sky right here. But before I do that, let's talk about skies. What kind of skies do you want to put in there? Well, you typically want to match your focal length. So this is a 22mm focal length shot. The scene that we're looking at is about a 35mm. They're roughly close to one another. They're so close in millimeters that it's okay. What you'd want to shy away from is a 200mm shot with 16mm clouds or vice versa, because it won't look realistic. So try to stay as close as you can with the millimeter of the focal length of the image that you want to put in there. So we'll go ahead and double click this cloud. And if you notice that when I take clouds for stock, I don't shoot for the foreground, I shoot for the clouds. So if you have some foreground here, that's okay. That's okay. I'm going to show you how we deal with that as we progress. You don't have to just get the pictures of the clouds, because really you do want this horizon in here, because sometimes your image might have a horizon right here and these clouds will match up perfectly. If you were to just point your camera straight up at the clouds, they aren't going to match. So you want your horizons to match, you kind of want your focal length to match, and you want your light direction to match also. This would be a good photo to use for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to increase my exposure a little bit, maybe drop the contrast, maybe drop the highlights to get some structure back in those clouds, and that looks about good right there. And I'll press open image. So it's going to open me up here in Photoshop from Adobe Camera Raw, and you'll notice that I have 2 windows here. What I want you to do if you want to edit like this is go to edit and then go to preferences, and in preferences go to workspace. In the workspace, it will default as open documents as tabs and enable floating window docking. I undo both of those because they're really annoying. Opening up as tabs will open all your images up here along the top of Photoshop, and then it's hard to switch between the images. The same thing is true with this enable floating window docking. As we move these around, they would dock up to the top of Photoshop, and that is really annoying also. So from a compositor standpoint, you want your images to be free floating like this and just kind of floating all over the place. So I'm going to move this image over to this one. I'm going to press the V for the move tool and then just click anywhere on it, press and hold shift and move it over to align it right from the center. And I can go ahead and close this one out now. I don't need this. Now these are very large files. I'm talking Sony a7R II 42.4 megapixel files. So if you download these and you drag them and drop them onto, let's say, your 24 megapixel image, it's not going to look right. So this is what we need to do. We need to press Command or Control T and then Command or Control 0. And what that will do is it'll show us the big picture. It'll show us all the stuff that's happening. And you see, like, my arms are going outside the window right now. This image is so big that it's outside our normal image here. So we need to make it smaller. If you press Shift and Alt while you're in this mode, that will allow you to change the image size, but keep the aspect ratio the same and keep it locked in the center of your photo. So we'll just move this up until we get right to the edges of my image, and there we go. So you'll probably have to shrink that in. If you have a 24 megapixel camera, you'll have to shrink this 42 megapixels in quite small. So I gave you high-res files to use as the cloud stock. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make sure that both of them are on there. Okay, we got this layer right on top of that one. I'm going to change the blending mode of the clouds to difference. And when I change that to difference, it looks really wonky. But notice what's happening right now. I actually see the treetops of the cloud image right there, and I can see where the clouds are going to rest when I move them and place them right on top of my image. And I think I like that. Compositionally, I like the way that's going to look. So now I'm going to go ahead and change that blending mode from difference back to normal, and then we are going to start our blending process. From here, you could try and make a selection of this and make a mask and do all this crazy stuff, but I'm telling you, this blend if thing is cool. So you can either right click here and go to blending options, or we can double click anywhere where it says layer 1, and that's going to take us into our layer styles. So what this is blend if. I've shown many tutorials on blend if before, but it's repetition is the key here. So what is blend if? Well, blend if is nothing more than protection measures. It's basically saying, okay, you have this layer selected here, and then your underlying layer is anything that's happening underneath it. So what do we need to do? Well, everything underneath this that we want to place these clouds into are our highlights. So if I were to move this over, that's wrong, because now I've just applied my clouds to my foreground granite rock structures, and I don't want that. So I'll move that back over, and then I'll do this. And I showed you that on purpose because with these blending options, sometimes it takes a bit of experimentation. Don't beat yourself up if you can't get it just right, okay? So I'm gonna move this over until this mountain range back here gets visible and doesn't have any little goobers kind of applied to it from the blending mode. And then I'll press Alt or Option to split this and feather it. That just feathers everything nice and neatly in, so that when we look at this, if we were to zoom in here, without the feather, we get these really pixelated kind of edges, but with the feather, if we press that Alt or Option and feather it, we get a nice smooth transition, all right? So we want that smooth transition, definitely want that smooth transition, and that looks about good right there. So let's take a look at these treetops over here and see how they're doing. These treetops actually do have some definition to them. So now what we need to say is, okay, the top layer, how are you applying yourself to this bottom layer exactly? And we can look at our blending options for that top layer. And it's not going to really work in the shadow areas, but let's look at the highlight areas. So notice I actually start to recover some of the stuff that's happening in this tree right here when I move this down to the left. When I'm saying this layer, this top layer, I want you to taper off some of your highlights a little bit to let whatever's underneath kind of show through. And we'll press Alt or Option and split and feather that in, so that now that actually gets some definition to our treetops there. And we can move that over a little bit more, and that looks good. And we'll press OK. So now we'll go ahead and press Control and Spacebar, and that will get us onto the magnifying glass, and press Fit on Screen. Right click, Fit on Screen. So now we've got our clouds on top of our image, and everything looks pretty good so far. It's almost right there, actually. It looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and move this around. We'll press V to move, and move this. So you'll see as we move it, it's still affecting the image everywhere that it would, because those blending options are already stuck there. So we didn't actually make a mask. There is no masking that has been done here, okay? So I'll move that right to about there, and that looks good. But we need to know. We need to know what's happening, because if we turn this on and off, look at our treetops are getting affected. Some of the stuff back here is getting affected. So how do we know what to actually mask? Well, let's create a mask to begin with. Just make that mask icon there. And above that, I'm going to make a new layer, and that new layer is going to be a solid color fill layer. With this solid color fill layer, I highly suggest you make this a very stark magenta, because magenta really does pop off the page more so than any other color in the color spectrum. Either magenta or cyan, but because skies do tend to have cyan in them, we'll just make it magenta and press OK. So now what we need to do is make a clipping mask. And a clipping mask is basically just saying, hey you, this magenta layer, I want you to only affect what's directly below you. So I want you to fit in there. So press Alt or Option and click right between those two layers, and that will create a clipping mask. Another thing you do is right click and say Create Clipping Mask. So now we actually get to see in magenta where this image, our cloud image, is affecting the rest of our photograph. And on the mask of the clouds, just click that mask. We now have a brush. We can press B for our brush tool, D to default us to black and white, and then we need to switch over to black, so press X to get us to black. Hotkeys are incredible. Memorize these hotkeys. So I'm going to press the right bracket to make my brush a little bit larger. And with the brush tool, I'm using a Wacom tablet. So I'm going to click these right here. This is going to make everything that I do very pressure sensitive, that will control the flow and also control the opacity of my brush. So I'll push that down and just go over all these little magenta goobers that kind of came into place here. So just kind of go over all that stuff. Okay. And then I'm going to also go down here over these trees. It looks good. And then I'm also going to zoom in, again, control and spacebar to get us to the magnifying glass and move in. And now we're back on the brush. So I'm going to make my brush size a little bit smaller, and I'm going to keep masking. And this is where everything gets really awkward, because I have to talk about something other than this so that we can kind of just, you can watch me, but we can still talk about something. So, interesting fact, I meant to do this tutorial a long time ago, but I ran into a bunch of issues. So the night before, so last night, I was about to do this tutorial and I lost power because we've been having some crazy thunderstorms here in Kansas City, and I didn't have the ability to do it then. So I'm going to go ahead and do it now. And then I'm going to just keep brushing away, and get all this magenta goobery stuff off of here until we don't see it anymore. Because what's happening is those blending options that we chose are still affecting our image, because the underlying area has some highlight areas that look like the highlights that you would see in the sky, but are actually happening in our foreground. And that's good enough. We don't have to get too far into there. So press Control and Spacebar, get back to fit on screen. And now we can just delete this magenta layer. Just press delete. Everything looks really good so far. But we may need to do this. We need to go into our opacity and drop the opacity down a little bit, just to make it blend a little bit better. And if you notice back here, what's happening back here, it looks like this is really fading into the sky. But right now our sky is too close to it. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to click on that mask again, and with my brush tool, this is where you can do some free blending. Okay, I'm going to make my brush really big by using that right bracket key, and make sure that the feather is set to a hardness of 0. And I'm going to change that flow back to 100% over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to just kind of hit that right back there. Not right here, because that's going to make a big mask over my whole sky. But I'm using that very soft edge, that feathered edge of my brush, to just make that smooth transition happen a little bit more smoothly on that range back there. And that looks great. So let's say you do all this work and you really like what's happened here, but you want to move it. You want to move the whole thing. Well, if you were to move this, notice what happens to our mask here. If we move this layer, it's not just moving our layer, it's also moving our mask. So if you look down here as we do that, if we move this around, you can see how that layer is affecting other things. That's because our mask is moving along with it. So what we need to do is, there's a little chain link here. Undo that chain link, and now you can move this anywhere, and all of our masking will stay the same, and so will our blending principles, to allow us to move this wherever we want. So let's say another hypothetical. You do all this work with this sky, and you're like, man, this sky just doesn't do it for me. What am I going to do? Well, open up another sky. Let's take this one, for example. We'll open up this sky, and for the sake of the tutorial, we'll just press auto. Just auto do that, and maybe increase the warmth a little bit, and just press open image. So now that's going to open us up here in Photoshop, and we can do the same thing. Just drag and drop this by pressing V, press and hold Shift, and drag it over to our layer. So now we have this guy. Let's do the same thing. Change this to difference and get it to match kind of roughly where we want as far as our composition to go. I kind of like it right there. Let's try that for size, and we'll go to normal. And now I can do the same thing I did with that magenta layer. I can press Alt or Option and clip this right in. And now I have this sky with all the settings of what's going on down below. And now we have a really realistic changed sky. Very realistic replaced sky. Almost to the point that nobody would really know. And so why does it look much better? Well, we actually have some definition now in that sky. Instead of it being a blanket of white sky, we have some definition there. And from here, I would edit further. I would maybe flatten this, add some curves, add some hue saturation, maybe run my zone systems, and just play around and have some fun. And just to show you another example of this from the exact same scene, but we're zoomed in a little bit here. Here, same thing, another sky replacement. Using the exact same technique, here's a sky replacement for this one. So what do we do? Well, we did a whole lot of things. The first thing we did was we found a good sky, a sky that matches the light relatively well, and that also has a roughly the same focal length. We then grabbed that sky, edited it really quickly to make it look like what it would look like if it was in the scene that we had photographed. We dragged it and dropped it right onto our photo, used the difference blending option to put our sky exactly where we wanted it to on that background. And then we used our blending options. We used those underlying layers and top layer blending options to really smoothly apply this cloud scene right to our image. We then cleaned up that mask using a clipping mask with that magenta layer. That is completely optional. You don't have to do that, but it really makes it easy to see exactly what you need to mask out. After that, we showed how you could move the layer by unlinking the mask so that you could freely move that there and still keep the mask available. And then we also showed how to drop another sky in if maybe the sky that you chose wasn't quite right where you wanted it to be. So again, my name is Blake Rudis with F64 Academy. If you like it, please give me those thumbs up, share it, comment on it, tell a friend, especially a friend who's got a great photo but their sky sucks. You can say, hey, you might want to your photo's good, but check this out. Check this out. It's a pretty cool tutorial. Also, subscribe. Subscribing is really important because these video tutorials come out quite often. I'm really rocking it over here in F64 Academy. Subscribe. And thank you very much for watching this. I sincerely appreciate your support. Take care.